Hey, what up, y'all? This is Dee Kei from the Mixing Music Podcast. Before we play the episode for you about headphones and have this awesome conversation with the owner of Ollo Audio, Rok, I want to say a brief thing. So, Ollo Audio, I've been using their headphones for the last month or so, and I really genuinely love their headphones. I kind of avoided brown nosing throughout the episode, so I asked Rok to talk generally about headphones. I honestly don't think I shared enough about how much I love them. And so I wanted to say that these get my Dee Kei stamp of approval, obviously. And I really believe in the integrity of the company. There's a couple moments in the episode where Rok kind of opens up in a way and shares his determination and passion for the craft in a direction that I think is incredibly honorable and heartwarming, especially hearing it from a dude that means it genuinely, while understanding the rules of, jokingly I say, late stage capitalism, right? End game capitalism. And it's just fascinating to hear that. So if you want to check out these headphones, just go to mixingmusicpodcast.com/Ollo. That's OLLO. mixingmusicpodcast.com/Ollo. Enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome back to the Mixing Music Podcast. I'm your host, Dee Kei, and with me today is a very special guest, all the way from Slovenia, founder of Ollo Audio, Mr. Rok Gulič. Welcome to the Mixing Music Podcast, Rok.
Hi, thank you for having me, Dee Kei. How are you doing?
I'm doing so good. Thank you for meeting with me. I know it's late in your evening. It's early in my morning. We want to talk today.
Yeah.
I know that you have this company and you make amazing headphones. I'm wearing them right now, which is funny because I see you're wearing AirPods. Amazing. Incredible. We're going to talk about headphones. And this episode is going to be, I'm trying to make it like the ultimate guide of headphones. I noticed that within the mixing and mastering world, and obviously within producers and recording for different reasons, right? A lot of people are moving to headphones, especially within the last 5 to 10 years. There's been, I remember seeing the first time an episode with Andrew Sheps talking about how he went from PMCs, these $100,000 plus speakers, and he's like, no, I'm mostly using headphones now. He was defending headphones. And then all the people on the internet were going berserk. They're like, why would you use headphones? And then now I see a lot of mastering engineers in LA that are winning Grammys, moving to headphones sometimes, if not all the time. And then obviously when mix engineers get invited to different places and they have to travel, they obviously use headphones and stuff. So we see this cultural shift of mixers and mastering engineers using headphones more often as we kind of go into the next generation of technology and philosophy and understanding. I want this episode to talk about that. And Rok is the ultimate person to guide us through this because Rok has created a company essentially out of his dad's garage around 2017 to build, for his purpose of building the ultimate headphones specific to mixing and mastering engineers, which is interesting because a lot of headphone designers and companies, I feel like, kind of design it for hi-fi or general listening audience and then decide to market it as mixing and engineering as well, kind of, or they're way too general broad. So I honestly think Rok is going to be a really good person to ask some of these technical questions to. And then at the end, we want to talk about why he decided what the decisions that he made and the philosophy that he has, the ethos that he builds these headphones by. I want to talk about those at the end as well. But before we get into asking about the philosophy and general engineering and mechanics of headphones, I want to talk a little bit about Ollo headphones, right? The ones that I have, they're very famously made of wood. They're beautiful. They're the first headphones I've ever pulled out of a box and thought, oh my goodness, these smell good. I've never had a headphone that smells good. But first, I want to build some rapport with you, Rok. I want to talk about what happened? Like, what made you decide to start building headphones out of a garage? What was the problem you were trying to solve?
Well, like any entrepreneur will most likely tell you that something happens in life, then that you try to address and fix by yourself because you're entrepreneurial. So you try to make things on your own. And that's what happened to me as well. So I got twins, 2 boys. At the time I had a band and I was mixing a record, only using speakers. But of course, that's impossible when you have babies in house. So, using headphones was the logical next step for me. And unfortunately, I was really unable to find any headphone that I would be happy with or that I could, learn it. Basically, that's also something that Shreps and others are saying. You got to learn your monitoring, which is, of course, true up to a point. And, based on that disappointment, I said, listen, it's just 2 speakers, in a chassis, it can't be that difficult. So I, made one in my dad's garage, and funnily enough, they were quite good, far from what you have right now on your head. But they were decent for a garage product. So what happened is that a friend wanted one, and then a friend of a friend wanted one, and another friend wanted one. And, essentially, maybe a year or 2 later, here I am building, a true startup in the audio space, in the audio industry, making headphones. And yeah, we've been very, very lucky to get support by some amazing engineers, really A-level talent supporting us. That is definitely a big help. When it comes to, spreading the word, the idea about Ollo headphones and also the knowledge about headphones in general, what we are doing right here, right now. Eventually talking about headphones in general, and I believe we'll touch on a lot of principles and stuff going on. I do have to note that you've been freezing quite a lot on my internet connection for some reason, so I was kind of catching and putting little bits and pieces together into a story to understand. So it might happen that I will ask you to repeat a question. Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. We are working. This is the problems, modern day problems of working with internet across almost across the entire globe. But yeah, I'm fascinated by the idea, something we never talk about in general in the podcast with other guests is I come from an entrepreneurship background, and I always like to laugh and joke about how my passion ended up being in the least scalable sector, like music, being a mix engineer, possibly, right? No, there's also some really good things, but I'm actually, personally, I'm interested in your journey as an entrepreneur, which is really fascinating too, but we're going to keep it to the craft of building headphones for now, unless I get too excited. So yeah, this is interesting. You have babies in your house, 2 twin boys, amazing. I'm a boy dad as well. I have 2 boys. They're not twins. So having headphones was a practical decision that you had. This is a common problem with a lot of the listeners of the podcast. Some of these people listening to the show are new parents, they're with babies, and most of the people, what's fascinating too is with mixing and mastering, it used to be a couple decades ago, you had to be in a studio. And now most people, including the Grammy-winning high-end engineers, are working from home and building it out from home. So you have this cultural shift of being in a professional place to now it's acceptable to do it at home, and then working within the constraints.
The main thing is that, of course, but the main thing is that the consumer changed its behavior, right? So no one is really listening through hi-fi stereo speakers in a living room anymore. Not even in a car. Especially the youngsters, they don't even own a car. Especially if you're in a city or just going to travel, using other travel support, whatever. But so it completely changes the landscape, who we are making music for, one, and secondly, how they are going to actually consume it. So obviously headphones are, 9 out of 10, if not more, the playback device of choice. So there you go. You do need to at least check your mix on headphones. That's like the minimal you have to do, even if you are like a full-blown speaker guru and speakers are the best thing that you've ever heard. You still have to be honest to yourself and to your clients and say, hey, I did check that, briefly maybe, but you did check it on headphones, because the soundstage does change. The landscape of the sound is slightly different. And especially now with the immersive sound coming into play stronger and stronger year by year, the visualization of your mix, for example, Dolby or Sony or whatever, it's quite dramatically different in headphones versus, having 10 speakers around your head. So that said, of course, mixing engineers need to rely on headphones many, many times. And then on the flip side, you mentioned the entrepreneurial side of music as a business, right? It does require that you travel a lot. And many engineers are also, playing in a band, or they are doing multiple things. They have multiple roles, maybe in multiple bands, in multiple setups, in multiple record labels, and so on. And that creates the necessity to work on the go, to work on airports or whatever, on the train, and from different campuses. And also, don't forget about students. There's a lot of students learning about music, not just music, but audio engineering in general, like creators, multimedia, video creators, YouTubers, and so on. There's a lot of audio happening. You need to mix something, even if it's just speech. You need to mix it somehow, somewhere. You gotta, understand at least the basics of it. So there's a lot of schools doing that, teaching, music industry in general and audio engineering. And 9 out of 10, they will not have a room that they can treat in whatever meaningful way. Usually they are in a rented apartment, they are in campuses. These days, our generation, and specifically even younger generation than I am, I'm 40, by the way, tomorrow. So,
Happy birthday.
They have even less, thank you, they have even less budgets. They can't really afford to own a home that you could modify into a studio. So that's just the reality. So 9 out of 10 will actually use headphones out of necessity as well.
Absolutely. You talked about some really good points that I want to rehash and talk about as well. You said, think of the consumer. Now, as a mixer, there are some inherent, whether it's good or bad is up for debate, right? And we'll talk about that. But the nature of psychoacoustics, acoustic in headphones, like the soundstage, because the lack of crosstalk without any sort of software, right? Or hardware and in general. The soundstage is totally different. I remember doing a mix where I mixed background vocals and I put them in a specific level and a specific, very spread out on speakers. And then I went to headphones and all of a sudden they're way louder and they were out of balance, in a completely different balance. So that was a moment in my life that I remember okay, I need to at least double check on headphones. That's important. And then you talked about just in general, the convenience that the consumer has of headphones. I don't want to go on a tangent, but this is something that people need to think about for Spotify as well. Spotify is just really, really convenient for the consumer. And same thing with headphones. The technology of headphones and Bluetooth AirPods is really convenient. And it's not feasible for us to force people that you should be listening through high-end speakers all the time, just like we did. We talked about travel, which is interesting because, especially as a professional mixing, mastering engineers, now we have to talk about what it's like to take vacations as a freelancer, which is almost not impossible. So I'm from Japan, right? And I go visit my family about once a year. And it's not, unless I deeply, deeply plan for it, it's not really feasible or good for me and my freelance business if I just leave the earth for a month, right? And not do any work for a month. So I have to prepare that I'm willing on within my boundaries and constraints that I can mix while traveling. And then the last thing you said, the convenience of students and living in LA when nobody has a house out here. Very few people have a house out here, especially in the beginning to middle stages of their career. It's just way, way too convenient. I want to keep talking about the general nerdiness of your desire to build headphones. I'm a nerd myself. And so I love to hear you talk about how you've thought about this. I think people want to know, obviously, the differences between components, and then what you think and your philosophy is. But there's some things that I want to eventually talk about. Like I want to talk about impedance. I want to talk about the fact that you chose tilted drivers, because the fact of the matter is people don't realize this. Like when building a unit, hardware, interface, headphones, right? The builder has to think about the eventual costs, who it's going to be sold to, where it's going to be manufactured, and they have to make decisions based on economical constraints and based on the target audience and the possible GDP of the previous market of that audience in the past. So it's like, it's a very creative, artistic thing. Sorry, yeah, I don't mean to. Yeah, it's fun. But it's like a video game, you know. You have certain points, and then you can only pick. Are you going to go full speed or like the new Oblivion that came out? Sorry, I'm getting really nerdy. All right, you have to pick where you're going to put your points into. So I want to talk a little bit about first some general, before we get into the design. I want to talk a little bit about. Okay, the first thing that I am curious about is very few headphones use tilted drivers. They're usually, from what I understand, flat drivers. Can you tell us about the difference between the two and what the purpose is? Sorry, is it angled drivers?
So, yeah. I mean, more and more headphones are actually using tilted drivers or angled drivers, which means that instead of pushing the air or sound waves directly to your skull at a 90 degrees angle, they are pushed slightly forward, kind of off axis, and they're angled towards your eardrums or ear canal, to be more specific. Because our ear canal is not at a 90 degrees angle to your head. It's slightly capturing sounds that are coming in front of you a little bit better and stronger than the ones that are coming from behind. So for that reason, if we move the speakers in a headphone slightly further forward and angle them a little bit, we get a better perception of the sound stage, and we also at least a little bit move this the phantom center that lives in your head. We move it a little bit further away, further into the basically up front, and that is extremely important. It gives the perception of quality is better. The perception of what is left, what is right, and everything in between is more detailed because our ears will have better resolution in that way. That would be the short answer. Yeah.
In this day and age, is that an extra cost thing? Is it cheaper to make just regular straight drivers, or is that becoming a lot more accessible now?
Of course it is, but not significantly, right? So it also depends on how you're building the chassis for the drivers. So what you have over there is CNC machined walnut, which is extremely complicated, and that piece over there is like the most expensive part of the headphone. Everything else is cheaper. So it's really, really, really complicated. So yeah, for us, for example, if we have like a flat speaker, as you mentioned before, that would be probably 20% cheaper on the wooden part, because we could use a different CNC method. Maybe we could use only 3-axis instead of 5-axis machining. And this all, influence how things are evolving. But it's important, as you mentioned before, like in a video game, when you have these points and you have to make decisions where you're going to put your eggs, if you want to call it that way. Of course, for us, the most important thing is to achieve translation so that whoever is using our headphones for mixing, that whatever they are doing will translate to other headphones and to other systems. It will never be perfect because translation cannot be one-on-one unless you have two identical systems. But the idea of mixing engineers, that they were called balancing engineers back in the days, is just to balance out the levels and the presence of individual tracks or elements in music or in speech, and make sure that those relationships stay the same no matter where you play those back. So that's the core idea about translation. And in order to achieve that, using headphones, the most important and the most dominant factor to be able to do that is flat frequency response. That's just pure science, and that's how it is. We can debate it, but you're going to lose. That's it. So flat frequency response is the most important part. That's like number one. Of course, then there we have the speed of drivers. Then we'll have the harmonics, distortions. Of course, we will have comfort, because if you can't mix, for 3 or 4 hours and you get a headache, then you're never going to achieve translation, because you're never finished mixing. So there's a lot of things that goes into designing a headphone for professional use. And in our case, the flat frequency response is what we are all about. So Ollo Audio is designed around that. And lately with the X1, we've pushed that to the absolute limits with the individual calibration. Which means that even though they're flat tuned out of the box, like within 2 dB tolerances, which is insane on its own, it's actually better than Sonarworks, for example. They're promising 3 dB tolerances. We have 2 dB out of the box. And we can push that another dB to get down to 1 dB tolerance to our target curve with the calibration software. So we can talk about that if you're interested.
Yeah, I actually want to. I want to actually go back. I was going to talk about more technical stuff, but you brought up some really good points, and now I want to talk about some philosophy. So to be fair, what you're talking about to the audience, so Ollo Audio with the X1 specifically, from what I understand, they calibrate each individual set of headphones, because even if you use the same exact parts, the same exact CNC machines, they might be fractionally different. So they're each headphone. So you get the headphone. When I opened my box, there was a card with like a specific code, and you download that profile. Then you use some third-party corrective software, which basically just EQs the output of the and then it can create like a digital driver as well on Mac and stuff that you just run the audio through. It's fantastic. It's amazing. And then from there, you can make it super flat. You can adjust how flat you want it to be. You can add like Harman curves, which boosts the bass, which I like. You can tilt the entire spectrum, which I like, especially with weaker headphones amps, which we're going to talk about. But one of the things, going back to philosophy, I find this really interesting. I find it fascinating, and I actually want to know your thought about this. We said at the beginning, a lot of other headphone companies kind of they don't necessarily market their products for mixing and mastering specifically. Maybe some of them on occasion. But what I found interesting is the branding and the box and all of the language on the website and in the manual, everything seemed to be, for like Ollo Audio, seemed to be 2 things. One, sustainability, and we could talk about that later, but also it was specifically engineered for mixing and mastering. So I want to ask you, like, what are some things that you're thinking about that's different from companies that are making general headphones for a general hi-fi or listenership audience with some audio engineering versus your company, which is specifically for engineering? What are some values and philosophy that are different between the two?
Well, for one, when we talk about professional audio or pro audio gear in general, the way I see it, of course, there's a technical component to it. How they're made, how they perform, what drivers are using, what membranes, what cables, all the technicalities. They are essential in whatever good product. Even hi-fi or pro audio, doesn't matter. They are essential to deliver a good product. Now, to flip to the other side of saying, all right, now we are in a professional category, in a professional industry. Now, that means something different, because you guys, when you mix, you're making money. You are, making sure that the lights are kept on. And if you rely on our headphones or any headphones to do your job, they cannot fail. And if they do fail, which of course happens here and there, you need to be able to get somebody on the phone to guide you, to maybe do a quick fix for the next 2 hours or whatever, just so that you can get through and, find a way to repair them either remotely, either send spare parts immediately with next day delivery, or, just use the pickup services and get them here and restored and so on. But all of that should be like a week, maybe 2 at maximum. So that, for me, is like just as important as the technical side. I think basically I'm using a lot of professional gear as well, obviously. So we're using, like some things in the laboratory which are like super expensive, super tricky, and you can get them from many different companies. Same thing as headphones, right? But there is a company that will service and ship spare parts and take care of us in matter of, a few days, maybe a week. And there's another company that is also perceived to be even better, like let's call it a Ferrari of the lab gear, right? And they will not pick up the phone for like 3 weeks or 4. It's just like, it's impossible. If something breaks, my production will be down. I cannot calibrate any headphone for a month or 2 months before they repair and ship it back. So what kind of professional company that's not pro audio? That's just bullshit. That's just taking money away from customers, from B2B customers usually, with a big promise, with a big brand, with big tradition. We've been around for 200 fucking years, right? And on the other side, you have like smaller companies that are doing things right, and they do pick up the phone and they do fix it. And usually they fix it with a small fee or even for free. So those two components are extremely important for me personally, to have in a professional audio gear. Don't you think so?
I 100% agree. I feel like, especially at the later stages of my mixing career, I feel like, yeah, I'm good at mixing, sure, but I feel like mostly I'm getting hired because I'm like a really good communicator and I always respond to emails on time. And when there's like an email thread of like 20 managers and A&Rs, I don't cause any problems. I think there's some real truth to what you're saying. There's value to that. That's really interesting. I'm thinking about like a company that is like the goal is to sell the most amount of headphones, which then becomes I want to say this is the first time I'm trying to say this out loud, so I might not be correct. So correct me, Rok, if I'm not making any logical sense. But one of the things that's really interesting about like Japanese craftsmanship, right, is that culturally speaking, Japanese people, they're not thinking about the economics of diminishing returns. People that make things like swords or knives or even baseball gloves in Japan, they're not thinking about diminishing returns. They're thinking about the ultimate craft and servicing for the clients. They're not thinking about whether this is economically feasible, and that's some of the things that, if I get a sense from you, is because it's a small, what is it? Is it a 6 to 8 man team, right? Like out of your garage, like honestly, just another nerd to other nerds. And you have this strong sense of duty and loyalty to customers that other companies don't have. That kind of flips the game as far as like responsibility and craftsmanship, where I like what you said earlier, which is we understand our customers are trying to make money. So all of our decisions, even from sourcing parts and the technical stuff to the non-technical stuff, is around professionals trying to make money and, in our cases, feed our boys, feed our children. And the first thing that you said is like customer service, but I'm sure that goes into the general build as well. Like, there's a strong, I'm feeling and sensing a strong sense of integrity to the craft that Allo has.
Sure, of course. I mean, obviously, most of us musicians, at some point we've been broke, and maybe we'll be broke tomorrow again, who knows. But the thing is, we can really appreciate when we get a piece of gear that first, it works. Second, it has strong support. It's not too expensive, right? But it's not cheap either. We value that. But it's serviceable using home tools. That's something that we all love. All engineers will love to have a way to, fix a guitar, fix an amp, fix a headphone, whatever, exchange a cable if required. So these things are like super, super important to us because they also lean into the sustainability that you mentioned before. So sustainability for us and Ollo is not just about the environment. It's about paying all the employees regularly. It's about paying all the suppliers by the book. So, in the 8 years, we've never been late with any of these payments or whatever. We always take care of things that are like super hygienic. That is extremely important. And for me, that is sustainable. That is sustainability. And the same goes into relationships, All these guys and girls, they need to develop themselves, personal development within the company. Of course, they've been with me since day one, but they need to grow as well. So we need to have an environment that enables that because that is then a sustainable environment to work in. So sustainability is like a word that's being tossed around, usually in relation to nature and eco-friendly and stuff like that. But I think sustainability is a lot more than that. It also goes all the way to psychological stuff. How do you feel in a company? How do you feel with a brand? Are you happy saying, or do you feel proud, selling this? So it goes all the way from internally, then to our resellers and to our endorsers. We have like 500 or 600 endorsers now all over the world. They're endorsing our brand in exchange for a little bit of a discount. So, we gave them a better price and in exchange we get their support. But I think that most of them are happy to do that. And they feel proud in a way, I believe so, I hope so, to support a brand that, has this sustainability kind of like umbrella over everything that we do. I think that's extremely important, and I really hope that we can keep that going into the future as well.
Absolutely. That goes into, I don't want to go into this tangent right now, but we've talked on different episodes about how that relates to our careers as mixers. Is like, it's a small industry, you're going to meet people, and you have to think about sustainability both in the sense of setting your own boundaries as well as not burning bridges, like being easy to work with, right? And investing in each other. I think that's really awesome. And I think to a certain degree, obviously I'm interested in the technicalities of the headphones, but it is quite nice being able to talk to the founder and owner of a company and to hear you say that, because I feel like at the end of the day, the consumer just has to trust like that you're making headphones with the best intentions, right? For my best interest, which I think is like really important. Okay, I do want to talk about this. So now that we've set up a foundation that you are building headphones for the professional mixer, there's a couple questions that come to mind. My first one that I want to ask is, there's a difference between, you brought it up a little bit, and I want to hear your philosophy and opinion on this. There's a difference between like flat and accurate and like translatability. Like, for example, I used to work on a set of speakers called ATEEZ. They're much higher end, and they don't sound that pretty. They're not that exciting, but as far as like translation goes, my goodness, like I was very hard for me to make a bad mix with those speakers. And then I hear other speakers that I won't name that are much more beautiful sounding. They're very exciting, but I just could not ever learn to trust them. And they were the same price speakers. Tell me a little bit about like what translation means to you, and like what are some of the practical applications of flatness versus other responses and curves and things of that nature. Like, what are some of the things that you're thinking about in that realm?
Sure. So when it comes to, you mentioned translation, and there's multiple ideas about what translation is. Every engineer will have like a slightly different idea what goes into, achieving translation and what it actually means. So some will talk about the soundstage, how things are positioned. Others will talk just about pure balance and nothing else. Some will talk about the color, the overall feeling of a mix, right? So does it feel the same or does it feel different? So, translation will mean different things to different people. But in terms of technicalities, what we know and what we can agree, which is rare in the audio industry that we agree on stuff, but we do agree that the flat frequency response is, the crucial part in achieving translation. So that's just it. But on the flip side, we do have multiple ideas about flat frequency response. So one would be the Harman target curve. Then there is a diffuse target curve. Then there's free field target curve. Then there's what, companies adjust to their taste out of those curves. Then there's our Ollo target curve, which was developed for example, in Dolby Certified Studio. We were just capturing that studio, which was certified, with the head and torso simulator. So we had a really good response captured at the eardrum of that simulator. Then took the simulator to the lab, put our headphones on that same simulator, played the same signals, and we were kind of very close to how far away from that ideal sound of a certified Dolby room we were. And then we did some A/B testing with human subjects to wait it out. Why? Because when you're in a room at 85 or 90 dB SPL, and those mega subwoofers in the Dolby room are, shaking your chest, it feels a lot different. Even though it's the same frequency response, it feels a lot different in a studio than it does when you only have two speakers attached to your head. And for that reason, we had to evaluate with human subjects doing A/B testing and saying, all right, in order for me to feel or translate the same as the studio did, I need a little bit more bass, or I need a little bit less highs, and so on. So the frequency response, even though it was 100% match on the ear simulator when it was in the room, and then when it was in the lab with the headphones attached to it, perfect match. But when you put it on your head, it's not the same. It doesn't feel the same. So for that reason, we had to adjust it as well. So there's this just pure science and measurements on one side, and there's this psychoacoustic element that also comes into designing a target curve like we did. So we are just one of the companies, same as Harman, Sennheiser for sure. They have their own idea. Biodynamic, they all have this spiky high-end spectrum kind of area and so on. It's not a mistake in their headphone. It's there by choice. It's by their design for sure. So, we have different ideas of exactly what flat is, but if we, zoom out, we will still be within those 3 dB tolerances. So we will have an idea that could be like 2 dB up, 2 dB down, but it's never going to be 5 or 6 dB of target. So overall, we are in an agreement about what flat is, and that is the important part when you're trying to achieve translation. That's why you can achieve translation, not just with our headphones. You can use multiple headphones and you will achieve translation, sure. Why not?
So it's interesting because I feel like when you talk about flatness, we're talking about not the curve specifically, but the utility of being able to hear and analyze all spectrum, the whole spectrum of the listenable frequency range. And then there's also preference that goes along with it, not just actual biomechanics of the ears and the shape of the ears, but also for me, because of the speakers that I grew up with, that I trained with, I like to hear more low mids than normal. So even when I'm using Sound ID, I have to boost the low mids to make it feel what I'm comfortable with, right? So there's preference. I noticed that with the Ollo correction software, I like to use the Harman curve or just a general tilt and boost the low end. That might also be because I'm using a weaker preamp, to be fair. And one of the
could be
possibly. Actually, I want to briefly talk about that. Is I don't think people realize the consumer. If you're listening to this podcast right now and you've never used an external third-party preamp with a lot more headroom, and a lot more power. I don't think people realize how much of a difference that makes. You talked a little bit about distortion and more importantly, transient response and like even low-end response through more powered headphones. Now you use you created one of the trade-offs that I'm sure you thought about philosophically is like the ohmage, the low impedance. What is it? 32, 35 ohms? I forgot exactly what it was. But like...
Yeah.
So you use lower ohms, which makes it easier to travel with.
The idea was just to keep it simple, you know?
Yeah, simple, easy to travel with. You don't need anything external.
Exactly.
But even with lower ohm studio headphones, there's a lot of benefit to having a separately powered headphone amp for the headroom. I don't think people in the audience understand that because, we don't typically use that very often. Can you tell me... just briefly in your own words, like how it changes and how much it can change for the purpose of mixing?
Very difficult because it gets subjective quite quickly. Also, on a side note, I really am not like a professional in the field of audio amplifiers. I do have one over there behind me, which is in the dark at the moment, which is a prototype unit that we developed here in-house to power the headphones. But, the reality for me would be that you can mix on whatever you have, and, having a decent interface is good enough, and you can get stuff from Focusrite, SSL, and so on, Arturia, and so on for like $200. They are far from ideal. We are not talking like something super great, but they are good enough. And with a headphone that has a flat frequency response, that comes with calibration, that is 32 ohm, that you can power from a laptop if you want to, you will be there. You can do your work, you can explore, you can learn, you can do whatever you want. But of course, having a decent amplifier or a great amplifier will drastically change specifically the low end. At least that's my experience. On the low end, anything below 50, 40, 30 hertz even, that's where the membrane has to move the most to create that frequency. And also the excursion of the membrane is the highest because, humans, we hear low frequencies a lot less than we hear the high frequencies. We are not as sensitive to them, which means that the speaker will have to produce a lot more for us to even pick it up. So going to 30, 20 hertz, you need to move the membrane quite a lot. And to do that, you need a great amplifier that is capable of how to put that in a simple language, to hold the membrane in place. So when it pushes it up, it needs to suck it back in and have control over it, because the membrane on its own, it's like a spring. It wants to move on its own. So you need to be able to stop it as fast as possible, and you need to start it again as fast as possible without the flutter effect, if you know what I mean by that. So that comes from a really strong amplifier. So that is the main difference. You will hear a lot more clarity in the low end if you have a decent amplifier. The transients will be stronger because it can push the membrane a lot faster and it can stop it faster. It's controlled.
That's fascinating.
Does that make sense?
Of course it does. Yeah, that's kind of the same idea from my understanding with subwoofers. It's not even about how loud they can be, but it's about the headphones and how much of the power you use, of the capacity. But also at the cost of, I remember using external headphone amp in the recording studio that we used to have with me and Lou. And customers could also easily just break the headphones because they were so overpowered. That's another dangerous thing you need to, I think, people need to be careful for. I have another question more about the future and like kind of the industry in general. Culturally, headphones have become more popular, especially in the last 5 to 10 more years. Maybe with the binaural fold down of Dolby, we'll continue to see more people having to rely on headphones. Technologically speaking, what advancements do you think we will see in the next 10, 20 years within the headphone community? Do you think it'll, like, I'm going to leave that open-ended. Yeah, what technical advancements do you think we will see?
Well, one thing I'm quite certain about is that all these DSP capabilities that we heavily rely on in the studio will find a way to shift directly into the headphone. It's possible now you can buy headphones from Bose, I believe, that will have some sort of DSP in there. Any noise cancelling stuff, they have basic DSP there. So it's not a technological issue. The issue is the environment where it's being used. So in a studio, the latency will kill you. So you cannot have a latency from Bluetooth or from DSP processing inside the headphone. So that is a problem. And just, until we kind of bridge this gap, the studio use or professional use will stick to the cable. That's just, that makes sense. And also we need to understand that when you buy a sound card for 400 euros or dollars or whatever, that sound card will have far superior DSP capabilities and ADDA conversion than whatever chip you're going to put into a small headphone. So you buy a card for several thousand euros usually or dollars, and you want to listen to it. So you're not going to be listening to DSP processing from the headphone. So in the studio, I think there's a gap, but of course in the overall consumer area, that is the next step where every headphone will have DSP capabilities and some sort of personalization in there, likely some sort of way of measuring your ear canal, your shape of your head, stuff like that, to better translate immersive audio, which is heavily relying on the HRTFs, which are head-related transfer functions, meaning where the resonances are from your ear canal and stuff like that. So you have to mimic that in order to achieve full immersiveness. So that's, I think, the next thing.
That's interesting. I remember at NAMM, they've been doing this for the last couple of years where like you could go into the Sony headphone booth and they would literally put microphones into your ear canals, put the headphones over them, they measure them, and you could not tell that you were not listening to the speakers. It was really trippy. And immediately as a mix engineer who typically uses speakers, I'm like, how do I get my room into this? And they're like, yeah, it's like $3,000. It's just not feasible. Rok, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time, Rok. I know you got to go to pick up your kids. Last thing, I really believe people should be checking out Allo headphones, especially if you're trying to do this professionally. Obviously, Rok has the best interest of us professionals in mind. Rok, last couple words of what do you think people should be? Why do you think people should trust you and your company?
Oh man, that's like impossible to answer. That's like, that's like asking a girl, why should I marry you? Come on, it's impossible to answer this. That's a trick question. What I'm going to say is, check the videos, check our YouTube channel. We are very active there. Check our endorsers. There's like really a lot of people endorsing us. Talk to them. These are like real folks. It's not like some, made up stories and stuff like that. There's true feedback from true professionals making money using our headphones. I mean, if that doesn't mean they're good enough for you as well, then I don't know what else I can say. But of course, I will say that the only true way to test any audio gear, from guitars to speakers to whatever, is to actually try it. So you can watch reviews, you can read about it, you can ask a friend. That's great, super important, of course. But the only way to know if the headphones or whatever gear is for you is to actually try it. And luckily these days, every reseller will offer, a return policy of some sort. So
there you go. And so if you want to go check those out, go to mixingmusicpodcast.com/Ollo, OLLO, where we will have a direct link to a specific targeted hyperlinked area, and we'll add that to the beginning of the episode as well, so people see that. Thank you so much for your time, Rok. I really appreciate you. I'm really excited for what Ollo's is going to do in the future, and we hope to hear from you again soon.
Thank you, Dee Kei, as well. Cheers.